Welcome to Carleton's Math Corner. Today, we are going to be discussing real numbers. To begin, let's put a smile on our face and know that learning is fun. And at this time, will you please take out your math journal as well as a pencil and your vocabulary packet. Our target today is I can classify real numbers. Well, first of all, let's discuss what is a real number. Well, real numbers are all numbers that can be written as a fraction, decimal, or integer. Real numbers are classified into two categories. The first category are rational numbers. And rational numbers are any numbers that can be written as a fraction. Well, there are quite a few different types of numbers, as you can see, that can be written as a fraction. The first type is an integer, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. This is an example, -3. Natural numbers, decimals, which they're in two categories, terminating, which means they stop, and then repeating, which means they have a pattern. And we use a repetend symbol to show that pattern. Percents, powers, mixed numbers, square roots, whole numbers, and then fractions. Those are all within this category of rational numbers. Now, the other category of real numbers are what we call irrational numbers, and these are numbers that can't be written as a fraction. So, for instance, any square roots, like if we put a square root in the calculator, some square roots have a decimal that goes on for infinitely, but it has no pattern. So we can't write it as a fraction. And so it kind of looks like this. So it just keeps going and going and going and going, infinitely. And we can't predict the number that's going to come next. And so one way to know if a number is rational or if it's irrational, well, rational numbers, we can predict what's coming next. So for instance, like -3, I know that -3 actually stops. There's the only number that comes next is 0.0. And I could put another 0 and another 0, and it could infinitely go on with zeros. Even with this decimal, 0.3 repeating, I know that a 3 will come next because it's repeating a pattern. Now, with irrational numbers, you can't predict the number that comes next because it is not repeating a pattern for us, and it's continuing on infinitely. So let's talk about the two different categories, rational numbers and irrational numbers. Well, we're going to focus on mostly rational numbers because there are quite a bit of different types of rational numbers. So we're going to start off and let's look at the first category. The first category is what we call natural numbers. Now, natural numbers, they are basically counting numbers. These numbers would include like just basic counting numbers. So like 1, 2, 3, etc. These numbers do not include 0. They do not include decimals that actually show place values in the tenths, hundredths, thousandths place. They also do not include any negative numbers. So it's all positive counting numbers. Okay. The next category we have are whole numbers, and they actually include natural numbers. These numbers are counting numbers as well, but they include zeros. So 0 is part of whole numbers. So here are some examples of whole numbers. Notice they're all positive, so no negative numbers. There are no decimals that have, any place values in the tenths, hundredths, thousandths, etc. And so these are some non-examples. So just counting numbers in 0. Then the next category under rational numbers are integers. And integers include whole numbers and natural numbers, but they also include their opposites. So like +5 and then -5, or 10 and -10. Integers also include 0. Non-examples of integers are, decimals that are beyond, the ones place into the tenths and hundredths. Those are non-examples. And so that could be included in that category. Now, the next group are what we refer to as decimals. Now, decimals can be terminating decimals, so that could be a number that ends in a place value. They could also be a repeating decimal, meaning it would have like this symbol on top of it, which is called a repetend symbol, and that means that it repeats a pattern. So this would be 1.17777, and it would go on infinitely. And also in decimals, we do include whole numbers. And the reason why we include whole numbers is because whole numbers actually do have a decimal point at the end, and we can put a 0. So really 16 is 16.0. Non-numbers of decimals could be, any other number that's written in a different form, like 56%. Yes, we could change that to a decimal, but right now it is not in decimal form. Or even a fraction. Could change it to a decimal, but it's not in, decimal form. Next category are fractions. And so the definition of a rational number is any number that can be written as a fraction. So all fractions, fit in this category, such as a proper fraction. So the numerator is smaller than the denominator. Even an improper fraction. We could also include mixed numbers, 6 and 7/8. Those are all examples of fractions. Non-example could be, anything in a different form, percents, decimals. They can be written as a fraction, but currently they're not in fraction form. So a fraction just basically means that it's a part out of a whole, and that's what we're looking for, is that we have a numerator and a denominator. We can also have negative fractions, so I could put a negative on this 6 and 7/8, and it would still be considered, a fraction. So it doesn't have to be positive to be a fraction. Next category are percents. And now a percent is just an amount per 100. Percent actually means per 100. And so a percent could be under 100%. It could look like that, or it could have a decimal point in it. It could have even a fraction in it. I could have 3/4%. But that percent sign basically means that this is out of 100. So if I had 100 boxes, 56 of them would be shaded. And that's what a percent is. So a non-percent would be, could be just a regular fraction. Fractions can be changed to percents though, but it could be that. It could be just a regular decimal, which I could change to a percent as well. What I would like for you to do tonight is I actually want you to try this out. I want you to classify the following numbers. So I want you to tell me, first of all, are they rational or irrational? Remember, rational numbers, you can predict what's going to come next. Irrational numbers can't predict what's going to come next. And then if they are rational, I want you to actually classify them with additional names. Are they natural numbers, whole numbers, integers, fractions, decimals, percents, etc. Because there are a lot of different names that are in that category of rational numbers. So, come up with as many different names that you can when classifying these numbers. Thank you so much for joining me at Carleton's Math Corner. I look forward to meeting with you again.